Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of this fantastic retail marketing series. And today's one is something I'm really passionate about, and it's all around the staff in your retail business. And I suppose that the title for today's one is your staff, your retail staff is not just for, and Richard is going to take away this title for me because it's gone out of my head again.
Inspiring staff is for life, not just for Christmas.
Now, so we talk about inspiring people. It can be one of those words, I suppose, that's up in the air. What does it mean, I suppose, on the shop floor? What does it mean to the marketing department, to the hiring manager, to the shop floor manager? Again, it can mean different things to different people. So we're going to really divulge on that today, see how that plays out in real life from a training piece, from a marketing piece. And yeah, I'm really excited. So I suppose starting off, Richard, from your perspective in the marketing field, I suppose, what role do our staff play in marketing? Because in other businesses I've been part of, we kind of looked at marketing like that's the marketing department's job. It's not really my job. At times that was the case. They were going to give us the promotional material. They were going to do the POS. They were going to tell us we nearly left it up to them to really drive footfall into the stores. And me and you both know when you're in a smaller independent retailer, you kind of are the marketing person and everything else in between that maybe you get away with not doing in the really large multinationals. But maybe you'll shed a little bit of light on that.
I think it's a really interesting question. And my thoughts on it are that when you go into a store and you interact with a colleague, member of staff, whatever the business calls them, they are the face of that company. And it's really interesting. Everybody talks about Apple and the Apple store. And I quite like going into the Apple store just to see how people interact with people in there. And they assume that everybody wearing an Apple t-shirt is, part of the family or, brings them closer to the brand. And for me, it's fascinating because the people that work in stores are the face of the brand. And I think for me, the people in store are too important to be left to just HR. And what I mean by that is if they're just staff that are there to sell, et cetera, I think we're missing a bit of a trick. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, marketing's too important to be left to just the marketing department. HR and looking after your staff is too important to be left to just HR. And I think for me, if we start thinking about, right, what does good look like in terms of great customer service and presenting the brand in a really positive light, and you start thinking about the people that do that really, really well in retail, why is it? And then you kind of pick out from that, why does it work? How does it work? And for me, we start off with the conversation, what does good look like? And in the UK, the first retailer that comes to mind is John Lewis. And there's that classic story. When you go into John Lewis, you'll find a nice person in a suit that knows about the product. And John Lewis has got this reputation for service and culture, but also when you talk to a colleague, they kind of 99 times out of 100, they're proud to work there. They're proud, they're not a colleague, they're a partner. We're a partner in John Lewis. And there's that kind of pride and, good manners and product knowledge. And you feel like you're not just buying from a store, you're buying from John Lewis. And it was interesting because I was thinking about this and I did a bit of research on it. And every time they do a customer service profile in the UK, John Lewis comes up in the top 10, not just of retailers, but of businesses. And you start thinking, well, why is that? What is it about them that is so good? And where does it come from? Because not everybody knows everything about, a bottle of Chanel or a Samsung television. It's a mixture of training and culture. And I think it's a really good question to start unpicking. Why is it that a chain like John Lewis has got that reputation? And why is it that people they treat the partners and the staff in those stores so well? Or why is it that when people go into an Apple store, they feel that when they talk to an expert, they really are talking to an expert? There's that sense of excitement. So I think, we talked about this before about benchmarking. For me, John Lewis is kind of a high point. And my question to you from an Irish perspective. Where do you kind of get that feeling when you go into a store that they're more than just a member of staff, they are part of the brand?
Yeah,
So
definitely. I think that's a really, really good question to ask. And I think touching on what you said, culture there. And I think when I look at brands and I look at really great branding, I think brand to me, that the people inside, or the staff inside that retail store, that's the personality of that brand.
yeah,
It 100% is. That's, this could be a particular brand, but the people that are talking about that particular products, that's the
bring it to life.
It brings it to life. That's the personality of it. And to give you an example, there's a brand here in Ireland. It's a DIY store. They've about nearly 40 stores in Ireland. Big DIY company, Woody's DIY. They're part of the Grafton Group, which is quite a big consortium of I suppose builder merchants across the board in the UK as well. And there, when you go in there, and everyone has this perspective, and I suppose if we were to compare, and I'm not going to name names, but there is other big DIY stores that you don't get that same customer service with. I know that whatever Woody store I go into in Ireland, across those 4 retail outlets in Ireland, I know there'll always be someone there to carry goods to my car. And they're nearly known for that. If you go in there, even if you're buying a thing of paint, the person in the aisle will be like, do you want me to put that in the boot of the car for you? So you nearly, every time you go in there, there's always, I've never once not gone in there and had somebody not offer to take stuff to my car, my shopping to my car.
See, that's where customer service becomes part of the brand personality. And I think what's great about it is when people start talking and sharing that. And that's what I mean about, it's not just customer service, it's that brand personality. And I think what's really interesting, we talked about conversational currency last week. And I think there's something really interesting where when that part of that brand personality is so strong, you share it with other people. And I love that example. And I was thinking about, because I always say, well, where can you benchmark from outside of retail? What does good look like? And I went to Disneyland in LA this year. And Disneyland's kind of got this reputation for being the happiest place on earth. And I was thinking, you know what it's like when you kind of go to a theme park in Europe, you kind of get the members of staff like, do I really have to be here? And you go to Disneyland in LA and everybody's really cheerful. Now, I'm not sure if it's because they've had 3 cups of coffee, or whether somebody's going, you need to be cheerful or you're fired. However, culturally, it was an incredible experience because, they make, whether you're buying something in a store or whether you're interacting with somebody on security or whether it's the characters. I met Darth Vader, what a nice bloke. And, you kind of have this experience where everybody is so involved with making it an experience. And for me, I was like, well, that's a high watermark. And that's why it's got the reputation of being the happiest place on earth. I would also caveat the most expensive place on earth, but we'll skip over that. But I do think there is something about when it's done so well, it becomes part of the personality, because it's not just a theme park with rides, it's an experience. In the same way that Woody's is, it's not just a DIY store. It's like, we know what we're talking about and we'll take it to your car and look after you. And I think that's where the whole idea of brand personality and the people on the front line executing it becomes really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And it's making me think, I suppose, that, we're talking about the brands that are, it's really clear when you walk in. It's really clear, I suppose, I know what I'm expecting, or I know what I'm getting. So when I walk in there, I can nearly predict the service I'm getting. And there's a consistency within that, okay? And I find the biggest letdown in retail is we're really not consistent with the customer service piece. So we'll have an up and a down, like on a graph chart, it'll be up and down, and we'll do really, really well. And I suppose going back to how do we actually get to a place where it's actually part of the culture? So if we were to look at another retail business and we were to, benchmark or compare, role model that against the Woody's of the world, and I have a DIY store and I want to be known for having that real personable experience where you walk in and someone is always going to be there to help, because that's what we want. We have online, but how can we compete with online is we want human beings. We want connection. We want to get help when we're in the shop. We want to get advice when we're in the fitting room. We don't want to be stuck in the fitting room with their little number card and not have anyone fetch a size for us. That sometimes happens, and we're going out with, our one shoe on and one shoe off, trying to get, a size. So I think it really goes back to, I think the brand understanding and having clarity of what experience they want their customers to have when they go into the store, what they want to be known for, but bringing that into all areas of the business, because I think I see this a lot. We have a really great marketing strategy. Okay, we want our customers to be going away thinking this, but what we don't do is we don't tie our recruitment or onboarding or training and our marketing all into that same customer experience model. Yeah. So if you're saying we want to be known as being helpful, how are we recruiting with that in mind? How are we actually
I think it becomes a way of life.
Yeah.
I think it becomes a way of life to get that brand personality over.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is if you do marketing and a customer service campaign once a year, I think it becomes tokenism, or it becomes one of those things, right, well, we need to do it because everybody else is doing it. And I think for me, when you have that brand personality and you can live and breathe and inspire it and reinforce it throughout the year, then it doesn't become tokenism, it becomes a way of life. And it's really interesting because I actually think this is potentially easier for independents to do than chains. Because if you're an independent, there's a brilliant example I'm going to use again, Upper Playground in San Francisco. All the staff in there wear the gear that they sell, and it's kind of street artists and hoodies and t-shirts, but they're kind of cool. Yeah. And they welcome every customer, and they're really proud to work there. And they're like, hey, you've got to try this because it's new and it's like done by this artist and it's really cool. And it's somewhere where you want to go and kind of hang out with them because it's kind of their way of life. They're really proud of the products. They know what they're talking about, and it's not forced. And I think it's really interesting as consumers, if you go into a store and it's almost that scripted, hello, sir or madam, how can I help you today? Because they've been trained to do it. And I think, imagine that you're the colleague in store and you've been told, right, you need to do this script. And I think what you have to do is pull people's personalities out and align it with that brand personality. And I think it is really possible to do all year round. I think what's really interesting is how do you get that philosophy into your colleagues? And I think this is a really interesting question around culture, around recruitment, but also aligning your marketing brand personality with how you execute it in store. And we talked about Disney and John Lewis as high benchmarks on with Woody's, but also how can you do that in your retail stores? And I think for me, it is putting all of it together and that brand personality. But I kind of, culture is a difficult thing to create. And I know you've worked with lots of different businesses and within them, what are the examples that you've seen where that culture is really good, and where is it where you've just gone, oh no.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And I think, I'll give you, we'll go back to the benchmarking piece, and I'll give, I suppose, just to continue on that rhythm.
The good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, we'll go back and then we'll go on to the ugly. So the good, I suppose, I think change management in any business is absolutely, it's a long process, I think. And anyone that has, a lot of chain of retailers will know this, or even in smaller, change is huge in a business. And I worked for a business back in 2015, and a new CEO took over, and they had a big strategy around the brand. They were rebranding it. It was, they wanted to change the philosophy within it, and it was a real 5 to 7 year plan to change the culture. And I think it's really important for people to understand that if they do go in and take over a business, you're really looking, if that business has been established for 10, 15, 20 years, you're really looking at a long-term change management plan, because it's not going to happen as quick as what you would like it to happen. And it's quick wins. The longer wins are going to be over a couple of years. Now, what was really interesting was I was part of that process of that change management culture piece. And going back to what I said there, that sometimes what can happen is the departments in retail, when they're in a big retail, you have the buying admin department, you have the marketing department, you have the HR department, you have the senior leadership team, you've so many different, you've the warehouse team, there's so many different, you've the suppliers, loads and loads of different parts. So you could be looking at about 6 to 7 different departments, depending on how large it is. What can happen sometimes is they're all working with their own KPIs, with their own objectives. They're given their own targets for their own roles in their own departments, okay? Siloed. And what can happen is that the marketing department can have a really great marketing strategy around, again, it could be branding, it could be people, it could be whatever that is. And what we done was we created customer avatars, okay? And this is where it got really interesting. We created customer avatars so that the staff could understand who each one of those customers were within that particular business. So they identified 7 of the key customers that they had in that particular retailer, and they created a persona for each 7 of those. And all of their marketing was based around those 7 key customers, all of their pricing strategy, their promotional strategy. So from a clarity piece, as a store, as a team member, you knew out of those 7 different customer avatars what price and strategy. So if you were talking to a customer segmentation piece, it was really easy for them to, how do I know to sell? Okay, it's this budget, it's this type of product. But what they also done then was they connected the customer avatars from the marketing department. They nearly created the personas of how we sell to them, how we talk to them as the brand values proposition. And what they'd done with the brand values was, and it was so pinnacle in the whole process of this, of building the culture, the brand values and behavioral values were built into the feedback model that the managers gave the staff every day, was built into the morning brief. So every single morning we had to talk about, we had the brand values on a board at the back of the store. And we had to name out one of the team, an example, a real life example of how they lived one of those brand values yesterday on the shop floor. So we would go, Mary, Bob, whoever it is, you're really homely and real. And homely and real was one of the brand values in that particular retail. And they were like, what do you mean by homely and real? Well, you're really authentic, real being authentic, and how you actually brought her over to the paint department, and you're really homely, you're really like personable with her, you really, showed her how your house was, you took out your phone, you showed pictures, you gave her ideas for cushions, and you brought her over then to another department, and without being salesy,
living the personality.
Exactly. But what you do, and I think what happens a lot of the time, when we talk about culture, and the retailers are doing it really well, our business is doing it really well, they have a really clear mission statement, really clear brand values and behavioral values. But how does that look like on a daily basis? Okay, and this is where they drop the ball. Okay, because we talk about, we have a lovely big poster in the stores of brand values and ethos.
And that's what I mean about tokenism.
Yeah,
there's a difference, and this is why I think I think there sometimes can be tokenism, which is right. We know we need to improve customer service, so we're going to have on a big poster, be nice. Well, what does that mean? And how does that get articulated? And I think what's really interesting is if you're an independent retailer, what's great is you get to set the culture. You get to define the brand personality. I think what's really interesting is how you execute it. And when you were talking about, well, actually, we did a stand-up every morning and we gave a demonstration of how we do it. I think that's one of those ways where you can actually, subtly imprint it on the staff. And that's where it becomes, the whole point of today's podcast is about inspiring staff for life, not just for Christmas. And if you just put a poster up saying, be nice, that's just one day. Or we're doing customer service week. What about the other 51 weeks of the year? And I think this is where it's a really lovely example, because if you are an independent, set the brand personality. What's the personality that's going to attract customers? Because when you go into a retail store, It's not just the products on the shelf, because reality is you can get it all online. You can.
Mm.
So what's the personality? What are the reasons for people to spend time? What are the reasons for people to know, like, and trust, and then really, hopefully, share? And I think that's the really wonderful thing, where you get a great experience. And it's not just we carried the paint to the car. That's a nice story that you tell your family. But it's the one where I went into a store in Oakland, and it was called Maple Street Denim. And they're like, oh yeah, really nice to meet you. Right, I know you like this brand of jeans, but did you know they've got this new one coming up, and it's got this little bit of stretch in the fabric? I think that size doesn't look right on you, but if you try this one here, absolutely spot on. But their culture, and there's a retailer that I'm working with at the moment called Solo Boutique, and they're in a town called Malvern. And I love her philosophy because it reminds me a bit of Maple Street. And her philosophy is, and she's very strict about it, I won't sell something to a customer if they look awful in it. They need to look fantastic in it. And it's part of her philosophy. And the rest of the staff have got it, which is, instead of just selling product, they need to look fabulous in it. What a great mindset. What a great thing to leave customers with. If you come into my store, you're going to leave looking fabulous. That's the whole thing about setting a brand personality. It doesn't have to be this complicated thing. It could be a philosophy and a way of life. And then she's trained all the staff. If somebody looks awful in a fluorescent yellow dress, tell them and go and get them something that they'd look fabulous in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And it comes back to that whole consistency piece, I think, because, and it does. And I think what can happen sometimes is we can all be saying different things. So we can be in a retail store and we can all have, I think this is what goods are, and we can have, and that's where it gets diluted. That's where it's not clear what that is we're actually offering. And then I'll give you.
But it doesn't need to be robotic. Exactly. It doesn't need to be robotic.
But I think what can happen sometimes is in retail stores, we can have a fantastic team member that's there for maybe 20 years, 15 years. They leave and the service drops. So looking at that as well, and I've seen this happen, and I'm like, but why? Why does it happen? Why do we have a great team member go out sick and the sales plummet, or the service is poor, or they leave because they might retire or they move on or whatever, and the service drops? And that again comes back to, we're all working individual. We're not working as a collective. We don't have that same vision within the brand. And I think that vision piece of, being really clear on, our values. What is it we value? What's important to us? And given your ethos example of, we want people to look amazing. We don't want them to walk out and not look great with that particular retailer you're working with, that being her mission. That's really clear for someone coming into the business. What it is they're delivering to their customers. And
I think there is something around recruitment, Louise, and it's really interesting. We talk about benchmarking, looking at examples. I work with a fantastic tour company in the city of Canterbury, and they do tours around the city. They can be boat tours, they can be ghost tours, walking tours. And what tied it all together, we built them a brand platform, and we called it Sharing Canterbury with the World. Because when you go out on the boats, the tour guides are not called tour guides, they're called captains. And we came up with this whole philosophy of sharing Canterbury with the world, because it doesn't matter what tour you go on, that's what you get. And we talked about his recruitment. And instead of asking, I said, what experience do you have in being a tour guide, or whatever. The question was, the first question now in every interview is, tell me a story. That's it. Tell me a story. And some people will freeze, and other people go, well, actually, and they're the people you want to recruit. So I think that, I go back to the example of the boutique and people looking fabulous. I want somebody to continue that philosophy. If I'm recruiting, I want somebody that's honest with style. And I think the whole idea of recruiting is really, really important. I think the idea of retention is really important. And I think the idea of that brand personality that you set, your philosophy, whether it is on a boat trip at Disney or in a boutique, it's exactly the same. What's your brand personality? What's important to you? And how can you get the right people to share it? And I think that standard question of, so what experience do you have? I mean, that's great. But it's also more important to get people that fit your culture. And whether I'm talking about the boutique in San Francisco, which is, you know, a little bit edgy, then I want people that you know, have got the right vibe, that want to wear the gear, that want to be able to talk to customers about, you know, their interests, which is, we sell street art on t-shirts and hoodies. And I think that kind of, that philosophy is so important. And maybe there's a question when you are recruiting, what are you actually recruiting for? Because if you just want people to put stuff on the shelves and go, customers, that's what you're going to end up with. And, you know, from your experience, have you found recruiting the right people to be in those kind of stores?
Yeah, I think it goes back again to that, the particular retail store that you're in, what the expectation is of it, you know, because each store is its own personality. Each store you go into has a certain persona. For example, if we looked at some brands that are maybe, you know, really loud, you know, high energy, and then if we had somebody offering, it could be meditation, it could be well-being, it's a different tone, it's a different pace, it's a different customer that we're talking to. So I think what we really need to be, I suppose, clear on, what is my brand? What if my brand had a voice, had a personality, what would that look like? And I think, you know, understanding that, I think, first is really important, because once you understand that, you understand what your customer base is, then you go and you recruit the team to suit that customer base. So I'll give you a perfect example. I worked for a retailer before, an Irish brand retailer, and a huge part of their customer base was a tourism market. So again, they had a domestic market during the off season, and they had a tourist market. Now, the tourist market, you know, it involved going out, the tourists could be coming in on buses. So you had to be mobile, you had to be, you know, you had to have a big personality, you had to be comfortable with walking up to groups of people. So you had to have certain personality traits, certain things that you're comfortable in doing. Could I hire somebody that maybe didn't like going up to large groups of people? No, because it's not fair on them, because I'm trying to fit them into a mold of a brand that doesn't really suit them. So maybe they'd be suited in a different role or a different part of the business. So it's once you're clear on what you're delivering and what that is about in that particular brand, then you go out and you go, okay, this is what I'm actually looking for, and this is what we need. And it's really being clear in the expectation piece, because going back to what you said there, and I think sometimes this is and it's a bit frustrating, because I've been in retail for 15 years, and it's one of my peeves, is that people have a perception of retail that anyone can just go in and work in retail. Like anyone can just walk in and, you know, it's just one of those jobs you don't need a big education for, you don't need a degree for, and you can just walk in off the street and sure, you know, no. You know, and people do have that perception that we're just going to hire people and it's just, you know, they're just out there to get the little jobs done. And it's not the case. And it can actually be damaging your brand. It damages the brand, and people really need to get their head around this. They're understaffed, they panic, they recruit, they're in peak trade, just get them in. We don't know. It doesn't work that way. I've seen it done. What it does is it damages the value of the brand. And it actually, what it does is those people that are passionate about the brand, that are driving the brand, that are enthusiastic, that goes down, that enthusiasm, that passion, because we've brought in people that don't really buy into the brand ethos, that don't really want to be there as such, and they're, you know, and it doesn't work.
And they're the people who are sharing your brand's personality with your customers, which is why I said to you, people are too important for just the HR department, and I think it's so much bigger than that, because they are the people that, oh, I went to blah, blah, blah retailer. Oh, yeah, it was awful. How was it awful? Well, the people were awful. And you kind of, that's why I think it's so important to get the right staff. But then I also think there's another point, which is how do you retain quality? How do you keep that kind of brand personality going? So it's more than just once a year. How do you, you know, get the colleagues on board? And I always find it fascinating that the really great restaurants, for instance, get all the staff to try all the dishes so they can talk about it to customers. And I think there's lots of things you can do to retain staff and colleagues in a way that works really well. How do you get them engaged and involved in the products? So obviously, if you're working in a luxury high-end boutique, the people that work there are not necessarily going to be able to afford the product. So how do you inspire them? How do you get them involved? And I'm not just talking about staff discounts. Staff discounts, great. It's one of the perks of working in retail, but I think there's so much more than that. You know, there's certain stores that will say to the colleagues, right, you've got an allowance, go and buy some clothes or go and have this. Or, you know, if you're working on a perfume counter or a cosmetics counter, you get so much product. And I think there's different ways of engaging and inspiring people. And I think actually getting product into them. We talked the other week about sampling. Why aren't you sampling to your staff? Whether it's food, drink, clothing, cosmetics, whatever it is, they're the people that are talking about your products. If you're launching a new product, how do you inspire them with it? And it's really interesting. I think some of the alcohol brands are really, really good at this. And they'll give the colleagues a certain amount to try, but then they'll also give people, if you think about this another way, if you're a brand, how do you get sell out of your products? And I just thought I'd share this really nice example. This is a small distillery called Maidstone Distillery. They're absolutely brilliant. Their gin is fantastic, great Christmas presents, and the Branscombe gin is really nice, as is their toffee vodka. And this is a classic. It's a measuring jug, a jig, and it's branded with the name on it. And they go and give this to bars. They leave it for the bar people to use. I mean, Jack Daniels have done it for years. Here's a classic kind of gentleman Jack jig. And it's one of those things, what can you give to your colleagues and staff that they go, oh, that's really nice. Oh, I tried that new product. Oh, you've got to try this new, whatever it is. You know, are you giving them the tools to sell the product? Because just to expect them, well, here's the product, go sell it. Okay, well, how do I get the personality? I know we need to do this personality about looking really stylish or looking really cool. How? And I think there's that, you know, you've got that opportunity to go, right, well, take some of that new cheese home and, you know, share it with your family and tell us what you think. Because we have to remember that the colleagues that work in stores live in the communities that they serve. They are part of the personality. And I think, how do you empower them? And you know, the jigs is kind of like a fun way of doing it. But there's also that kind of idea that how do we empower them to take the retail personality out to their communities? And it's not forcing it, but it's giving them enough resources so they feel part of the team. They feel part of the culture. They take pride of working and sharing that brand personality with other people.
I think that's really, really important. And listening to what you said there is, and I do think it's sometimes forgotten about, is we've external customers, we've internal customers, and our internal customers are a team. And I think it's sometimes not, I think sometimes once we've onboarded the team, we've put them through, they could be on a 3-month training program, whatever that looks like in a particular organization. And we kind
There you go.
Off you go.
We'll see you at your appraisal.
Yeah, we'll see at your appraisal. And there isn't a touch point. And I think the only time we really touch in again is if we have to put them on a performance improvement plan, or there's issues, or, you know, or their sales are astronomical. So I find what can happen is, unless they're blown out of the park or they're underperforming, that's the only times we're really intervening with some of these staff. And I think that's a big issue. You know, those people that are consistent, that are, you know, showing up every day, that are doing that, you know, they might be blown out of the park every day, but who can, they're not underperforming, but they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're doing a really great job. And I think what we need to be thinking about is, how are we actually motivating them? How are we inspiring them? How are we supporting them?
How are we empowering them?
Yeah.
How are we empowering them? How are we saying to them, right, well, we've got this new range of clothes in. We've never stocked it before. Go and sell it. Not really. You're asking a lot. But actually, if you turn around to them and say, you know, our personality is this, 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 this. This is this new range that we think customers are going to love. This is why they're going to love it. Just feel the fabric, feel the material. And actually, if you talk to your suppliers, they will send you additional product because, and I use the example of Maidstone Gym. If they're going to put that product into a retailer or a bar, they'll make sure that the staff get to try some because they're the people that are going to sell it. But if you go and talk to your suppliers, we talked about this last week about if you ask for point of sale, you ask for that kind of additional help, they'll provide it to you. If you turn around to them and say, look, we know we're launching your product. Are we okay to get 2 or 3 extra samples for the staff? Or, you know, could you send somebody into the store just to talk to the colleagues for 5 minutes about this new range? These are the things that I'm talking about, practical steps to help you sell out, but also to reinforce that brand personality, to empower the staff. And also we talk about retention. We all know what a nightmare recruitment is. So if you get good people, empower them, look after them, retain them. And it's not just a pay rise. It's not just staff discount. It's about noticing them and empowering them and helping them to deliver your brand personality and be great at your job.
Yeah, I think recognition is a big one. I think recognition is, and it goes back to that whole, is our recognition system or our succession planning system, is it set up for, you have to do astronomical sales, you have to have really high KPIs, or, you know, you're underperforming and then you're pushed out to one side, you know, what does that look like in your business? Because I think it's so important, you know, are we actually recognizing when people are being empathetic? You know, I worked in a retailer before and a customer came in, she cut her finger outside. One of the team got the first aid box and gave her a plaster and stuff and gave her a glass of water from the canteen. Now, she didn't need to do that. It was a busy department, it was peak trade, but she done it because she cared, she had empathy, she talked to the lady, she was having a really busy day. I was trying to get her kids from school. So are we recognizing these little things? Are we shouting about them going, this is why our brand is so amazing? Because we've people like you working in it that actually goes above and beyond, that, you know, isn't just there to process things at the tail, isn't just there to do stock counts, isn't just there to serve, but is actually taking a step further, rings the customer.
They're the face of your brand.
Exactly.
They are the face of your brand. And if we go back to the original idea, they are the face of your brand. And that brand personality that you have, I think, is vital. That, you know, not only do you hire and retain the great people, that you allow people to, you know, show some of their personality through, like you said about the empathetic colleague. I think what's so important is that you also recognize these people and encourage and you know, they are your brand. It's not just the products that are in store. They are the people that work in store. They are so much more important than just being colleagues or just being a checkout operator. They are the face of your business. And I think this is such an undervalued part of the marketing mix. You know, if you've got some marketing budget that you can spend looking after your team, they will look after you.
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing to touch on for anyone that's in marketing or in that retail space. How much of your budget is actually, do you have any part of your budget? Have you thought about that for the retail team that are driving that? Because I think it does get caught up in, you know, CRM programs, gift to purchase, all this. And I know
Louise, otherwise it would just be a poster on the wall saying be nice.
Yeah.
How do you execute that? And I'm not just talking about a Christmas party for all the staff. It's all year. And I think this is where, you know, it's like a little bit of a challenge to marketing teams. Like, how do you engage colleagues in store? And I'm going to share with you a quick example from Sainsbury's days. They did a program where they needed to get sales up by X amount. And they realized that if they could get every transaction to spend £1.10p, they would hit the target. Not a huge amount. So what costs £1.10p? Well, actually, if you got some nutmeg and you grated it into your spaghetti bolognese, it tastes amazing. And please try it. Just get some nutmeg, grate it into your bolognese. You'll be like, oh, that was a good idea, that. They gave 150,000 colleagues a nutmeg with, if you grate this into your bolognese, it tastes fantastic. sales went up of nutmeg. Now, that's one example, but it was more a case of, how can you talk about a product that nobody knows about? How can you inspire people to say, right, to get sales up by £1.10, all you need to do is sell some nutmeg, one per transaction. And it kind of got the idea over. It kind of got the idea over that you can try something new today. That was the philosophy at the time. Try something new today. And this is how you live and breathe that value. And I think there is something about in really, really, how do you inspire your colleagues? Because not everybody has got the budget to spend thousands and thousands on training. But it is possible to get enough budget to go, right, here's a new product, we're going to share it around the team. And like I said, go and ask your suppliers. Your suppliers that put product into your store need your help to sell that product out. Have you ever thought about asking for that little bit of addition of budget to inspire and train the staff in stores to help sell it out? Really simple.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Going back to Woody's DIY, the brand I worked for before, and they have once a year, it's a huge thing. They take all their colleagues away for a couple of days, and what they do is they have like over up to 50,000 products ranged in their stores. So it's a huge offering of products, as you can imagine. What they do is they bring some of the suppliers, the bigger suppliers, they gather them all in this huge location, and they bring staff, managers, retail store teams away on a bus up to this location where all the suppliers are. So what happens is we all go with bags and bags and bags of freebies, of goodies. I think I came back before with a little, you can make a little kind of a birdhouse, you can paint it with your kids. What it done was we all came back with all of these different products. And we were actually used them, but we're giving them to, oh my God, these amazing seeds. You can plant your little strawberries, in your kitchen windowsill, and all these fantastic, because we talked to the suppliers and we seen what they could do, and they done demos with us. They shared. I came back with 2 massive bags of gardening stuff, and I don't have green fingers, but man was I enthusiastic, and I'm not a gardener, about gardening, because I was privy to that. I seen how big it was, how inspiring.
It's inspiring.
So inspiring, and it goes back to that again. And the suppliers got involved in that. It wasn't just the store, and it was absolutely fantastic. And another retailer I worked with, the Kilkenny Group, they sent 5-6 store managers. I was one of them, down to a beauty school. They were introducing well-being products. They're all skincare products, and they realized that, in order to sell these in the stores, the managers really needed to know what it was about, what the skin was about. So they actually sent us away for 2 or 3 days, and we got certified in skincare, which is absolutely amazing. They funded it. What ended up happening with those 6 store managers, right? Well, you can pretty much guess it. We went back into the stores, and our stores were the highest selling. My particular store was one of the highest selling in skincare across the group. Why was that? Because I was confident in the product. I was passionate. I went down to, we actually asked the beauty school to use the products we were ranging. So it was a tailored main program in the store. So we experimented on each other. We knew. I went into the store and we done skincare days. So I closed the store. I told the colleagues, take off your makeup, put it on, see what it feels like. And the sales just went up and up and up and up. And we asked for samples from the suppliers. It sounds like, it does sound a little bit like common sense. It does sound like, it's pretty, but a lot of people aren't doing it. And going back to what you said there, we think, but a lot of people aren't doing it. But the sales just went up and up and up. It really did. It was phenomenal to see.
I think to sum it all up, and we started off with people who are too important for the HR department. And I think our colleagues and our staff are our front of house. They are reflections of our brands. They're the people that are going to drive sales. And they're worth investing in. And I think they're worth investing the marketing philosophy and all of this stuff we're talking about, how it all fits together. The marketing, the suppliers, the sales, the motivation side of it, the recruitment, all of it comes together. Your brand personality and getting the right people to execute it it has to be more than a token effort of be nice poster on the wall. It has to be a way of life. And I think that when you get it right, you can end up with a really virtuous circle where, you know, colleagues feel not just I work in a store, but I'm part of the business. And then you look at the high watermarks of John Lewis or Disney. It's absolutely possible to create that in an independent. In fact, it's easier because you control the culture, you can control the brand personality, and hopefully some of the ideas, the practical ideas that we talked about how you execute that, inspire you to think that colleagues are so much more important than just being a colleague selling products.
Yeah, love that, Richard. So where can people reach out to you, Richard? We've come to the end of the show. And if anyone wants to listen back, we've another 2 episodes. There is so much more there. We've touched on the last part, which is your people. We actually went back to the very beginning of what marketing is, what it looks like. And there's really great key takeaways in those other 2 episodes. But Richard, if people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you? What do you kind of offer? What do you do?
Thank you. It's dead easy. Go onto LinkedIn and put Richard Liverman or Richer Solutions. That's my business. I work as a professional mentor and coach. I also do branding and retail consultancy. I absolutely love it. I've spent my entire career in retail marketing and mentoring. It's such a brilliant sector. And what I hope to do is offer kind of my experience and my skills to try and help people elevate what they do, because it's a brilliant sector. And with a little bit of help, you can do so much cool stuff that helps develop your brand personality and your retail stores. So thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much for coming on, Richard. And definitely reach out to Richard. He does talks, he does mentoring, he does everything in between. Thank you so much for coming on, Richard. You've been absolutely fantastic sharing all your knowledge. Thanks a million.